Hello, and thanks for watching this video. I'm really excited today to talk about OpenAI Agents SDK. What is this? It is a lightweight framework from OpenAI that is designed for building AI agents and agentic workflows. Let's go ahead and look at the documentation. All right, so here is the documentation. I will link this in the comments, so feel free to read through this. There's a lot of good information in here. I wanted to scroll down to some of the features that are available. We have Agent Loop. It's a Python first framework, so if you're familiar with Python, this will be easy for you to pick up. You can have agents as tools, agent handoffs, sandbox agents, guardrails, function tools, integrates well with MCP servers. We have sessioning, human in the loop capabilities, tracing, which we'll talk a little bit about today, and real-time agents. So there's lots of features. I'm not going to talk all about them today, but it's a really robust framework that's been really fun to learn. The video today will strictly be an introduction, getting started with OpenAI Agents SDK, so a basic example to get you going on your OpenAI Agents SDK journey. Future videos that I launch will have more in-depth examples and more complex use cases, but for today we are just all about getting started. So let me switch back over to Cursor and we can jump right into the code. I'm using Cursor. You can use whatever IDE you'd like. I linked the notebook in my GitHub repo in the comments, so you can clone this notebook and start working on it right away. This is a link to the official GitHub code base for OpenAI Agents SDK. But let's go ahead and get started. So first thing you'll need to do is install the OpenAI Agents package, which is right here. And then we will also be working with this python.env package, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. So I already installed this, so I'm going to skip that because that does take just a little bit of time. Then from those packages that we've installed, we want to import these libraries. From the OpenAI Agents package, we will be using these agent runner and trace classes. Agent is what it sounds like for creating agents. The runner class has methods to help run those agents, and then trace is a way to look at the logs, look at the activity that your agents are doing inside of platform OpenAI. And I'll show you how to do that a little bit later. And then before we get started creating agents, we need to load our OpenAI API key. It doesn't have to be an OpenAI model. You can use other models like Gemini or Claude or whatever it may be. But for this example, I was just be working with models from OpenAI. So in order to do that, whichever model you create, you'll have to create an account. For this example, it's platform.openai. Create an account there, and then you can create a developer API, similar to lots of other services and accounts that you probably worked with. And then once you have that API key created, you will copy it and add it into your .env file. And that's what that package that I was showing you, this python.env, it's basically looking for your API keys in a file called .env. And I'll show you what that looks like in this .env demo file, because I don't actually want to share my API keys with all of you who are watching. But all you have to do is you put OpenAI underscore API key, and then the key that you created. If you were using a Gemini model, you would go to your Gemini account and create the API key and paste it here. It does have to be this exact wording, so whatever model you're working with, be sure that you get the correct name, because that's what this package will be looking for, is that specific name. Okay, so once you have that configured, you'll run load.env. You can print this statement to make sure that it was able to find your API key. It looks like in this case it did, so we're good to keep going. I did want to start with a super simple example that is basically from the documentation that I just showed you. It kind of gives a quick example of how to configure an individual agent. So first you'll use this agent class, which comes directly from that OpenAI agents package. Creating an instance of that class, we're going to call it poet. And then we give it a name. This can be anything. We give it instructions. So this is going to be like your system prompt. So we just say you are a poet who creates beautiful poetry. And then you define the model that you want to use. In our case, we are working with our OpenAI account. So we are using an OpenAI model, GPT-4o mini. So just a really small, quick model that's not too expensive. And then how we run that is we use this runner class, which we imported from that package, and then use the run method. So we do runner.run. First argument is going to be the agent instance that we created, so poet. And then the second argument is our prompt. So we say write a haiku about artificial intelligence. And again, I copied this almost directly from the documentation. This is the one that they give to start off. And there is another option to use. Instead of runner.run, you would do runner.run sync. The difference is that this runner.run method is asynchronous and the other one is not. You do have to add that keyword await, similar to other asynchronous commands that you might be familiar with. And so then I'll kick that off and I will print the result. In order to get to just the result, you do have to drill down just a little bit into final output. And there you go. We have our haiku about artificial intelligence. So super simple example, but that's the idea of how to create an agent and how to run it. Now we're going to go into a slightly more complex scenario, although it is still pretty basic because this is still just an introduction video. The end goal, first of all, is to create a comprehensive professional level report about a given topic. And we are going to use two agents to accomplish that goal. First, we have our researcher agent, and then we have our reporter agent. And you probably guessed, the researcher agent is going to do the initial research about said topic. So it's going to do all the work of gathering facts and details. It's going to hand that off to the reporter agent, and the reporter agent is going to take that and polish it and create a professional report from those facts that the researcher gathered. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we want to do is we are going to create the system prompts, and these are a lot more in-depth than the one we saw up above. But we'll start off with the researcher instructions or system prompt. I'm not going to read this word for word for the sake of time, but you can pause it and read through it. Basically, we're saying you are a skilled, resourceful researcher. Your job is to deeply investigate any assigned topic, intelligently leverage your knowledge and available tools. And then I'm going to skip and down to the bottom, focus on accuracy, clarity, and actionable insights in your findings. And then we move on to the reporter, and we say you are a meticulous analyst renowned for your keen attention to detail. You excel at transforming complex topics. I think you get the idea. That's our system prompt for our researcher and our reporter agents. All right, so let's run that. Let me make sure I didn't forget to run anything else, not yet. So we run that cell, we set up our instructions. Let's go down to the next cell. Now we are going to start creating our agents. So similar to the simple example I showed above, we create an instance of this agent class, give it a name. The name can be anything. Professional researcher is what we will call it. We give it the instructions, and this time we're passing in the variable that we created up here, and then we pass in the model. We are going to use GPT-4o mini because I don't want to spend a lot of money. So I ran that cell and created my researcher agent. Now I'm going to do the same thing with reporter, passing in the reporter instructions. Just to change things up a little bit, we are going to use the newer mini model, 4.1 mini instead of 4.0 mini. So we have two different models working on different tasks. And again, it does not have to be an OpenAI model. It could be a Gemini model. It could be a Claude model. It could be a DeepSeek model. It does take just a few more lines of code to get that set up, and I'll show you that in another video, but it really is pretty simple to apply different models in this OpenAI Agents SDK framework. So I went ahead and created that. We assign a topic. We are just going to do ancient Egypt. I did do another video where I did this exact same workflow using AutoGens, and I also created a report about ancient Egypt, so I'm just keeping it the same. Feel free to check that video out if you want to learn about AutoGen. So we have our topic. Now we are actually going to run the researcher agent. We're going to do our initial research about the topic of ancient Egypt. So first thing is we want to start a trace. This is not required, but if you want to go into platform.openai and look at the activity that is being done by your agents, this is helpful in identifying the work that the agents are doing. You'll look for this doing initial research trace when you go, and I'll show you what that looks like in a little bit. Then the more important part is we run that await runner.run method. We pass in our researcher agent and we give it the prompt. So we say research the topic, ancient Egypt, find interesting facts, people, dates, events, sources, etc. Output 8 to 10 detailed bullet points about your findings and only return the results in Markdown. So we're just asking it to produce 8 to 10 detailed bullet points about ancient Egypt. So let's go ahead and run that. I probably should have ran that while I was talking about it, but it shouldn't take too long. And then once that completes, which it looks like it did, we are going to run this in Markdown. And I did import some Markdown libraries you can check out up above to print this in a nice format. So you can see here we have our initial research results. You can see that it's printed, looks like about 8 to 10 detailed bullet points about ancient Egypt. I'm not going to get into the details. That's not necessarily the important part. And it does even list the sources like we asked it to. Well, let's build the report now. So we're going to take these bullet points and we're going to pass them to our reporter agent and have our reporter agent create a detailed report with those. Again, we are putting it underneath a trace. This time we are calling the trace building the report. I'm going to start running this while I explain. First argument is the name of the agent. So it's our reporter agent. And we say you are provided with the following research notes, and that's our research results. For each bullet point, expand it into a clear and comprehensive report section. And we say a lot of different things. Retain factual accuracy, where appropriate, enrich each section with relevant supporting details. If any details appear to be inaccurate, correct them. And then we give it some instructions about output. It should be a full report structured by main topics with each topic developed into a distinct section. And then at the end, include a concise sources section and format the output as Markdown. So that took about 14 seconds. And let's go ahead and print the results. And there you go. So we have our final report. You can see it is a lot more detailed. You can see there's a lot more information about each of the topics. If you were to read through it in detail, you'd probably notice that it's polished and a lot more organized and structured. And even just looking at it visually, you can tell that there's a lot more that's going into this than what the researcher agent fed into it. So we have successfully created a report using our simple two-step agentic workflow. We are almost done. The last thing I wanted to show you was the traces. So if we go here to this website, this is at platform.openai.com. This is the same place where you would create your API key that we pass in our .env file that I showed you earlier. You go to logs and then you go over to agent traces. So you can see that I've run this workflow a lot of different times before actually recording, but let's look at our most recent ones. So doing the initial research, that's what our research agent did. And you can see the different steps that were taken, the different parts of what the agent was doing. Let's go into the deepest level. You can see things like what model was used. So GPT-4o mini, you can see the total tokens used was 846. The response was in text. You can see the instructions that were given, the system prompt. You can see the input that we gave it, and then you can even see the output. And then each of these steps in here has different information. So it shows input tokens. That one doesn't have as much information, but from the high level, again, you have the total output tokens and input tokens. So this is not super interesting at this point, but if you were using a more complex example, maybe you had an agent that connects with MCP server and the tools that the MCP server offers. You could see it doing web search. You could see it if maybe you have another agent that it's calling that was created as a tool. It could get a lot more interesting to look at these traces. And then lastly, we go into the building a report agent. And if we click into this last one, again, we can see this time it's using 4.1 mini. It's using a lot more tokens because input, we gave it that whole initial research as the input. So this one was definitely the more expensive part of our workflow. You can see there's the input, all those findings from the research agent, and then the output, the report that we saw. So that's kind of how the traces work. Yeah, that's how to get started with OpenAI Agents SDK. Stay tuned for more videos about this topic. I really love this framework. There's certainly a lot more you can do with it, so stay tuned. I hope this video was helpful though, and if it was, please like the video and subscribe to my channel for more videos about OpenAI Agents SDK and other topics as well. Thanks again for watching.